The shopping cart hit Sophie Mitchell so hard she went down like a stone. Her knees cracked against the concrete, her palms scraped raw, trying to catch herself. The afternoon sun blinded her for a second as she looked up, trying to understand what just happened. A woman stood over her, face twisted with rage, mouth moving fast, yelling. Sophie could see the anger in every muscle of the woman's face, could see spit flying from her lips as she screamed words Sophie would never hear. Sophie's hands moved instinctively, signing. "I'm sorry. I didn't hear you. I'm deaf." The woman's face got redder. She grabbed Sophie's shoulder and shoved her back down just as she was trying to stand. The concrete bit into Sophie's palms again, fresh blood mixing with the dirt. More people gathered. Sophie could see their shoes, their legs, their faces looking down at her. Nobody helped. Nobody moved. They just stood there, watching, probably wondering what this 16-year-old girl had done to deserve being shoved to the ground in a Target parking lot. Sophie's throat burned with the tears she refused to let fall. This wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. Being deaf in a hearing world meant moments like this, moments where her silence was mistaken for rudeness, where her inability to hear an angry stranger's warning became justification for violence. The woman bent down, her face inches from Sophie's, still screaming. Sophie could smell her coffee breath, could see the veins bulging in her neck. Then the woman did something that made Sophie's blood run cold. She grabbed Sophie's hands, pinning them against the ground. For a deaf person, that was like taping someone's mouth shut. No hands meant no voice, no way to communicate, no way to defend herself or explain or ask for help. Sophie struggled, trying to free her hands, but the woman was stronger, heavier, angrier. That's when the shadow fell across them both. A massive figure stepped between Sophie and the sun. The woman looked up, her expression shifting from rage to something else. Fear, maybe. Or shock. The man was enormous. 6'4" at least, built like he could bench press a motorcycle. Tattoos covered both arms, disappearing under the sleeves of a black t-shirt. His leather vest had patches Sophie recognized from the news, from articles her mother had shown her with worried eyes. Hell's Angels, outlaws, dangerous men. The biker looked down at the woman holding Sophie's hands. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold. He said something, just a few words, but whatever they were, made the woman let go immediately and scramble backward. Sophie pulled her hands free, cradling them against her chest. The biker turned to look at her, and Sophie saw his expression change, saw the exact moment he registered her age, her tears, the blood on her palms, the absolute terror in her eyes. He held up both hands slowly, palms out, the universal gesture for, "I'm not a threat." Then he did something that made Sophie's world stop spinning. His hands moved. Not random gestures, not the clumsy attempts hearing people made when they realized she was deaf. Real sign language. Fluid, confident, perfect. "Are you hurt?" Sophie stared at him, her mouth open. A Hell's Angel. A biker who looked like he ate nails for breakfast, signing to her in ASL like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Are you hurt?" he repeated, his face concerned now. "Do you need help?" Sophie's hands trembled as she signed back. "I'm okay." She was angry. I didn't hear her behind me with her cart. I didn't mean to. Stop. His signs were firm but gentle. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing." The woman who'd pushed her was backing away, saying something to the crowd, making excuses probably, telling her version where the deaf girl was the problem. The biker didn't even look at her. He kept his attention on Sophie, signing. "Can you stand?" Sophie nodded. He offered his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. His grip was gentle despite the calluses and scars. He pulled her up easily, steadying her when she wobbled. "Thank you," Sophie signed. The biker looked at her palms, at the blood and dirt ground into the scrapes. His jaw tightened again. Then he turned to the crowd that had gathered, and even though Sophie couldn't hear what he said, she could see the effect. People scattered. The woman with the shopping cart practically ran to her car. The biker turned back to Sophie. "My name is Tommy," he fingerspelled. "Tommy Bradford. What's yours?" Sophie, Sophie Mitchell. "Sophie. Nice to meet you, Sophie. Not great circumstances, but nice to meet you anyway." His slight smile softened his hard features. "We need to clean those hands. There's a drugstore across the street. Will you let me help?" Sophie should have said no. She knew what her mother would say about going anywhere with a stranger, especially a biker, especially a Hell's Angel. But this man had just protected her when everyone else had watched her get hurt. This man signed to her like she was a real person, not a problem to be solved or avoided. "Okay," she signed. Tommy walked beside her across the parking lot, matching his long stride to her shorter one. He kept his body slightly between her and the crowd, shielding her without being obvious about it. Sophie noticed his motorcycle parked near the entrance, a massive black Harley with chrome that caught the sunlight. Inside the drugstore, Tommy led her to the pharmacy section. He grabbed antiseptic wipes, antibiotic ointment, and bandages. At the counter, he pulled out a worn leather wallet and paid cash. The clerk's eyes went wide when she saw his vest, but she didn't say anything, just took his money and gave him change with shaking hands. Tommy guided Sophie to a bench outside. He opened the package of wipes and held one up, asking permission with his eyes before touching her. Sophie nodded and held out her hands. He cleaned the scrapes with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone his size. His touch was careful, precise. When Sophie flinched, he paused, waiting for her to be ready before continuing. "Where did you learn to sign?" Sophie asked while he worked. Tommy's hands stilled for a moment. Then he set down the wipe and signed. "My daughter. She was born deaf." Was. Pain flickered across Tommy's face. "She died 6 years ago. Car accident. She was 10. Sophie's throat tightened. "I'm so sorry." "Me too." Tommy went back to cleaning her hands. "Her name was AVA, Ava Bradford. She was the best thing that ever happened to me. She was lucky to have you." Tommy shook his head. "I was lucky to have her. She taught me to see the world differently, taught me that being deaf wasn't a disability, just a different way of experiencing life." He applied the antibiotic ointment with careful fingers. "She taught me sign language, taught me about deaf culture, taught me to be patient and present. She sounds amazing. She was." Tommy's hands moved slower now, wrapping bandages around Sophie's palms. "She would have been 16 this year." "Your age, I think?" Sophie nodded. "Thought so." Tommy secured the last bandage. "There. Good as new. Well, almost." "Thank you," Sophie signed. "For everything. For stopping that woman. For this." She held up her bandaged hands. "Don't thank me for basic human decency." Tommy's expression was serious. "That woman had no right to put her hands on you. Ever. For any reason." "It happens sometimes," Sophie signed. "People get frustrated when I don't respond to them. They think I'm being rude or ignoring them. That's their problem, not yours." Tommy's signs were emphatic. "You exist in this world just like everyone else. If they can't handle that, they need to work on themselves." Sophie felt something warm bloom in her chest. In her 16 years, she'd met plenty of hearing people who claimed to be deaf-friendly or supportive. But most of them still treated her like she was fragile, like her deafness was something to be worked around or fixed. Tommy was the first person in a long time who just got it. "Does your mother know where you are?" Tommy asked. Sophie's face fell. She pulled out her phone and saw 3 missed calls and 7 texts from her mom, all increasingly frantic. "I need to call her," Sophie signed. "Want me to call for you?" Sophie shook her head and opened her video relay service. A moment later, an interpreter appeared on her screen, connecting her to her mother's phone. Her mother's face filled the screen, tight with worry. Even through the phone, Sophie could feel the anxiety radiating from her. "Where are you?" her mother signed, the interpreter voicing simultaneously. "I've been calling for 20 minutes. You said you'd be quick at target." "I'm sorry, Mom. Something happened." Her mother's expression shifted instantly from worry to fear. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm fine. A woman got angry because I didn't hear her behind me. She pushed me down. But someone helped me." "Someone pushed you?" "Sophie, where are you right now?" "I'm at the drugstore across from Target. The person who helped me cleaned my hands. I scraped them when I fell." "I'm coming right now. Stay there. Don't move." "Mom?" "Stay there." Her mother's face disappeared. Sophie looked at Tommy. "She's coming. She's probably going to freak out." "Because a biker helped her daughter?" Tommy's smile was wry. "Can't say I blame her." "You're not scary," Sophie signed. "Yes, I am." Tommy gestured to his vest, his tattoos, his size. "I know what I look like. It's okay. Your mother should be protective. That's her job. They sat in silence for a moment. Sophie studied him, trying to reconcile what she was seeing with what she'd been taught to believe about bikers. Her mother had always warned her about men in cuts, men with gang affiliations. But Tommy didn't feel dangerous. He felt safe. "Can I ask you something?" Sophie sighed. "Anything. Why did you help me?" Tommy was quiet for a long moment. When his hands finally moved, they were slower, more deliberate. "Because I've seen what happens when nobody helps. I've watched my daughter struggle in a world that wasn't built for her. I've seen people be cruel out of ignorance or frustration. I've seen her come home crying because someone made fun of her or pushed her or treated her like she was stupid." His jaw tightened. "I couldn't help Ava that day, the day of the accident. I was on the other side of town. I couldn't get there in time. I couldn't save her." He looked directly at Sophie. "But I was here today. I could help today. And I'll be damned if I'm going to stand by and watch someone hurt a deaf kid when I have the power to stop it." Sophie felt tears burning behind her eyes. "I'm sorry you lost her." "Me too. Every single day." Tommy wiped his eyes quickly, almost embarrassed to show emotion. "But she taught me something important before she died. She taught me that the deaf community looks after their own. And even though I'm hearing, she made me part of that community. She made me promise I'd always look out for deaf people, especially kids. That's a beautiful promise. It's the least I can do." Tommy glanced toward the parking lot. "Your mom's going to be here soon. I should probably—" "Wait." Sophie signed quickly. "Can I give you my number? Just in case I need help or something." Tommy studied her face. "You sure? I'm not exactly the kind of person most parents want their kids talking to. I'm sure." They exchanged numbers just as a silver SUV came screeching into the parking lot. A woman jumped out before the car had fully stopped, her face frantic with worry. "Sophie!" She was signing and talking at the same time, rushing toward them. Sophie stood up. "Mom, it's okay. I'm fine." Her mother grabbed her shoulders, checking her over like she might have hidden injuries. Then her eyes landed on Tommy, who had stood up as well, making himself even more imposing by accident. Rachel Mitchell was a small woman, barely 5'2", but the look she gave Tommy was pure protective mother bear. She positioned herself between her daughter and the biker, signing rapidly. "Who are you? What happened? Did you hurt her?" Tommy held up both hands in surrender, then signed back. "My name is Tommy Bradford. I saw a woman push your daughter to the ground in the Target parking lot. I intervened and helped clean her scrapes, that's all." Rachel's mouth fell open. A biker, signing, fluently. "You sign," she stated, still suspicious. "My daughter was deaf," Tommy signed. "She passed away 6 years ago." Something in Rachel's face softened slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Tommy looked at Sophie. "Your daughter is brave. She handled herself well today." "What exactly happened?" Rachel asked, looking between them. Sophie explained the whole story, signing while Tommy added details. Rachel's expression grew darker with each sign. "Someone needs to report this," Rachel said. "That woman assaulted you." "The cameras probably caught it," Tommy signed. "If you want to press charges, I'll back up Sophie's statement. I saw everything." Rachel looked at him for a long moment. Sophie could see her mother's internal struggle, the prejudice against bikers warring with gratitude toward the man who'd helped her daughter. "Thank you," Rachel finally signed, her movement stiff but genuine. "Thank you for helping her. Anyone decent would have done the same." "But most people aren't decent," Rachel signed. "Most people see a deaf girl and they either ignore her or treat her like she's broken. You treated her like a person." "Because she is a person," Tommy signed simply. Rachel nodded slowly. Then she looked at Sophie. "We should go. Your father's worried sick." "Can I say goodbye?" Sophie asked. "1 minute." Sophie turned to Tommy. "Thank you for everything, for seeing me. Thank you for trusting me," Tommy signed back. "Not many people do. They should." Sophie smiled. "Text me sometime? I'd like to hear more stories about Ava." Tommy's expression softened. "I'd like that." "Be safe, Sophie." "You too, Tommy." Sophie climbed into her mother's SUV and Tommy watched them drive away. He stood there for a long moment, his hands still tingling from signing. He hadn't used ASL that much in years. After Ava died, he'd locked it away. Too painful a reminder of everything he'd lost. But today, helping Sophie, it had felt right. like Ava was guiding his hands, making sure he kept his promise. Tommy climbed on his Harley and rode home to his small house on the outskirts of town. The house where Ava's room still sat untouched, where her artwork covered the refrigerator, where her absence echoed in every corner. He pulled out his phone and looked at the contact he'd just added. Sophie Mitchell, 16 years old, deaf, brave as hell. Tommy opened his text messages and started typing, then stopped. What was he doing? He was a 52-year-old ex-con with a criminal record and gang affiliations. She was a teenager with her whole life ahead of her. But his daughter's voice echoed in his memory. Not her actual voice. He'd never heard that. But the way she'd signed to him, emphatic and clear. Promise me you'll look out for deaf kids, Daddy. Promise me you'll use what I taught you to help people like me. He'd promised, and Tommy Bradford never broke promises to his daughter. He typed out a message. Hey Sophie, it's Tommy, just checking that you got home okay. The response came back almost immediately. Home safe. Mom's hovering, but I'm fine. Thank you again for today. Tommy smiled and put his phone away. Maybe this was the start of something. Not anything inappropriate. God, no. But maybe a mentorship. Maybe a chance to honor Ava's memory by helping another deaf kid navigate a world that wasn't built for them. Maybe this was what he'd been waiting for, without knowing it. A week passed. Tommy didn't hear from Sophie, and he didn't reach out. He figured she'd been a momentary connection, a one-time thing. He went about his life, working at the garage, riding with the club, trying to outrun the memories that never stopped chasing him. Then his phone buzzed with a text from Sophie's number. Can I ask you something? You don't have to answer if it's too personal. Shoot, Tommy replied. What was Ava like? You said she taught you to see the world differently. How? Tommy sat down on his couch, Ava's favorite stuffed elephant still propped against the pillows. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment. Then he started typing. Ava was fierce. That's the best word for her. She never let being deaf stop her from doing anything. She wanted to play soccer, so she did. She wanted to be in the school play, so she learned all her lines in ASL and had an interpreter voice for her. She wanted to ride on the back of my motorcycle, so I taught her all the hand signals we'd need to communicate while riding. He paused, then continued. She taught me that deaf people don't need to be fixed or pitied. They just need the world to meet them halfway. She taught me ASL, obviously, but she also taught me to look at people when they're talking, to be patient when communication takes longer, to appreciate silence instead of fearing it. Another pause. She taught me that hearing people are the ones with the disability. We can't communicate without sound. Deaf people are more adaptable. You can sign in the dark, underwater, through windows, across crowded rooms. Your language is more flexible than ours. Sophie's response came quickly. Nobody's ever said that to me before, about hearing people having a disability. Ava used to say it all the time. She'd tell hearing people they were sound-dependent and watch their faces twist up trying to figure out if they should be offended. I love that. I'm stealing it. Tommy smiled. She'd want you to. They texted back and forth for an hour, Tommy sharing stories about Ava's childhood, her stubbornness, her joy, her absolute refusal to be limited by other people's expectations. Sophie shared her own experiences, the isolation of being one of only 3 deaf students in her mainstream school, the exhaustion of lip reading all day, the frustration of being left out of casual conversations because nobody wanted to slow down and sign. Do you go to deaf events? Tommy asked. Deaf community gatherings? Sometimes. Mom takes me to the monthly deaf dinners at the community center, but most of the people there are adults, not many kids my age. Would you want more deaf friends? Yeah, but I don't know how to find them. The other deaf students at my school don't use ASL. They're oral deaf. They don't really see themselves as part of deaf culture. Tommy thought for a moment. Then, give me a few days. Let me make some calls. Calls about what? Trust me. 3 days later, Tommy texted Sophie an address and a time. Saturday, 2 p.m. Wear comfortable clothes. Bring your mom if she wants to come. Sophie showed the text to her mother, who was immediately suspicious. Where is this address? Sophie looked it up. It's the Hells Angels Clubhouse. Rachel's face went pale. Absolutely not. Mom. No, Sophie. I appreciate what that man did for you, but I am not letting you go to a biker gang's headquarters. He said you could come too. That doesn't make it better. They argued for an hour. Sophie pulled out every weapon in her arsenal. The fact that Tommy had been nothing but respectful, that he understood deaf culture, that he'd known Ava, that he'd promised to introduce her to other deaf kids. Finally, Rachel made a compromise. I'm calling him first. If I don't like what he says, we're not going. Sophie handed over her phone. Rachel called Tommy's number via video relay. When he answered, she launched immediately into protective mother mode. Mr. Bradford, my daughter says you've invited her to the Hells Angels clubhouse. You understand why that concerns me? Tommy's face was serious on the screen. I understand completely, Mrs. Mitchell. If I had a 16-year-old daughter, I wouldn't let her within a mile of a place like that under normal circumstances. Then why are you inviting her? Because there's nothing normal about this circumstance. Tommy paused. I've spent the last 3 days reaching out to everyone I know in the deaf community. Teachers, interpreters, families with deaf kids. I've organized a gathering, a deaf youth meetup. 20 kids are coming, ages 12 to 19, all deaf or hard of hearing, all fluent in ASL. Rachel's expression shifted from suspicious to surprised. The clubhouse is just the location, Tommy continued. It's private, spacious, and we won't be interrupted. My club brothers have agreed to stay away for the afternoon. It'll just be the kids, their parents, a few interpreters, and me. Why would you do all this? Rachel asked, her voice softer now. Because Sophie said she wanted more deaf friends. Because I know how isolated my daughter felt sometimes. Because I can't help Ava anymore, but I can help other kids like her. Tommy's face was earnest. Mrs. Mitchell, I give you my word. Nothing inappropriate will happen. This is just a chance for deaf teenagers to hang out, sign freely, and build community. You're welcome to stay the entire time. Hell, you're welcome to bring other parents. The more supervision, the better. Rachel looked at Sophie, who was practically vibrating with hope. What time on Saturday? Tommy's face broke into a smile. 2 p.m. And Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for trusting me. Saturday arrived with Sophie barely able to contain her excitement. She'd never been to an event specifically for deaf teenagers before. The monthly deaf dinners were great, but they were all ages, and the kids her age usually got dragged there by their parents and spent the whole time on their phones. This was different. This was intentional. Rachel drove them to the clubhouse, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. When they pulled up, Sophie could see why her mother was nervous. The building looked exactly like what you'd expect from a biker gang headquarters, rough, industrial, slightly intimidating. But the parking lot was full of minivans and SUVs, not motorcycles. Parents were walking their kids to the door, chatting in sign language. Tommy stood at the entrance, greeting everyone. When he saw Sophie, his face lit up. You came, he signed. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought your mom might lock you in your room. Rachel snorted, having caught that exchange. I considered it. Tommy led them inside. The clubhouse had been completely transformed. The usual bar and pool tables were pushed to the sides. In the center of the room, comfortable chairs and couches were arranged in a large circle. Snacks covered a long table, pizza, chips, cookies, sodas. A projector was set up in the corner. And everywhere, kids were signing. Sophie's breath caught. She'd never seen so many people her age using ASL all at once. The room was alive with movement, with conversation, with laughter that didn't need sound. A girl about Sophie's age approached, signing. Hi, I'm Isabella. Is this your first time? Yeah, Sophie signed back, suddenly shy. I'm Sophie. Cool name. Come on, I'll introduce you to everyone. Isabella grabbed Sophie's hand and pulled her into the fray. Within minutes, Sophie had met Dakota, Jordan, Zara, Kenji, Aaliyah, and at least 10 others whose names blurred together in the best possible way. They were discussing everything. School, families, the frustrations of living in a hearing world, funny stories about sign language miscommunications. Sophie found herself laughing more in the first 30 minutes than she had in the previous 6 months. Rachel watched from the side of the room, chatting with other parents. Tommy stood near the snack table, making sure everything ran smoothly, but staying out of the way. After an hour, he got everyone's attention by flashing the lights, the deaf equivalent of calling for quiet. Having fun? He signed to the group. 20 hands responded with enthusiastic yes signs. Good, that's the whole point. But I also wanted to tell you why I organized this. Tommy's face became more serious. 6 years ago, I lost my daughter, Ava. She was deaf, and she was the most important person in my life. The room went still, all eyes on him. Before Ava died, she made me promise something. She made me promise that I'd use what she taught me to help other deaf people, especially kids. She made me promise I'd create spaces where deaf kids could just be themselves without having to work so hard to fit into the hearing world. Tommy paused, collecting himself. This meetup is me keeping that promise. I want this to be a monthly thing, a place where you can come, hang out, make friends, and just exist without having to translate yourselves for hearing people. He looked around at all the young faces watching him. My daughter taught me that the deaf community is a family. You look out for each other. You support each other. You understand each other in ways hearing people never will. His hands moved emphatically. You're not broken. You're not less than. You're just different. And different is beautiful. The room erupted in applause, not clapping, but the ASL version, hands waving in the air. Sophie felt tears prickling her eyes. She looked at Tommy and signed, "Thank you." He signed back, "Thank you for giving me a reason to keep my promise." The afternoon flew by. They played games. Charades in ASL was hilarious since everything was already visual. They watched a movie with captions. They just talked endlessly about everything and nothing. By the time parents started arriving to pick up their kids, Sophie felt like a different person. Lighter, more whole. Isabella hugged her goodbye. "Same time next month, I'll be here," Sophie promised. In the car on the way home, Rachel was quiet. Sophie glanced at her mother, trying to read her expression. "What?" Sophie signed. "I was wrong." Rachel signed back, her eyes still on the road. "About Tommy. About what today would be." "What did you think it would be?" "I don't know. Something inappropriate. Something dangerous." Rachel shook her head. "But what I saw was a man honoring his daughter's memory by helping other kids. That's really beautiful." "He's a good person," Sophie signed. "Yes," Rachel agreed. "He is." The monthly meetups became the highlight of Sophie's life. Every month she'd count down the days until Saturday, until she could spend an afternoon in a space where she didn't have to work to be understood. Tommy was always there, organizing activities, making sure everyone was comfortable but never intruding on the kids' space. He was like a guardian angel, present but invisible. Sophie and Tommy also started texting regularly. Nothing inappropriate. Rachel monitored the conversations. Just an ongoing dialogue about life, about being deaf, about Ava. Tommy shared photos of his daughter, videos of her signing, performing in school plays, riding on the back of his motorcycle with her arms spread wide like she was flying. Sophie shared her own struggles, the exhaustion of school, the loneliness of being different, the frustration of people treating her like she was fragile. "You're not fragile," Tommy texted. "You're one of the strongest people I know. I don't feel strong. Ava didn't either sometimes. But strength isn't about feeling powerful. It's about getting up every day and facing a world that isn't built for you, and doing it anyway." Those words became Sophie's mantra. When school was hard, when people were cruel, when she felt like giving up, she'd remember, strength is getting up anyway. 3 months into the meetups, something shifted. Sophie arrived at the clubhouse to find Tommy looking stressed. His usual calm demeanor was cracked, worry evident in the tight lines around his eyes. "What's wrong?" Sophie signed. "Nothing. Everything's fine." But his signs were clipped, distracted. Sophie didn't push. She joined the other kids, but she kept an eye on Tommy throughout the afternoon. He was on his phone constantly, texting, stepping outside to make calls. When the meetup ended and the other kids had left, Sophie approached him. "Tell me what's wrong." Tommy looked at her for a long moment. Then he sighed and signed. "One of my club brothers has a nephew, 7 years old, recently diagnosed as deaf. The family's struggling. They don't know sign language, don't know how to communicate with him, don't know where to find resources. Can't they get help from the school? They're in a rural area. No deaf education programs. The school wants to mainstream him without support." Tommy's face was grim. "The kid is going to fall through the cracks. What can we do?" Tommy looked surprised. "We? You're not the only one who can help people," Sophie signed. "I'm deaf. I know what that kid is going through. Tell me what he needs." Over the next week, Sophie and Tommy organized a care package for the boy and his family. Sophie put together a guide for newly deaf kids, tips for school, communication strategies, resources for learning ASL. Tommy reached out to his contacts and found a deaf mentor willing to work with the family via video chat. The parents sent a video thanking them, their son standing between them with a huge smile, signing "thank you" over and over. Sophie watched the video 3 times, her chest warm with a feeling she couldn't quite name. "This is what Ava meant," she texted Tommy. "About the deaf community being family." "Yeah," Tommy replied. "This is exactly what she meant. Can we do more? Are there other kids who need help?" Tommy's response took a few minutes. When it came, it was longer than usual. "Sophie, I need to be honest with you about something. Over the past 3 months, I've been contacted by 17 families with deaf kids who need help. Some need basic resources. Some need mentorship. Some are in crisis, kids being bullied, isolated, or worse. I'm trying to help all of them, but I'm one person. I'm not trained as a counselor or advocate. I'm just a biker who learned ASL for his daughter. I'm worried I'm going to let these kids down." Sophie read the message twice, then called him via video relay. When Tommy's face appeared on screen, he looked exhausted. "You're not going to let them down," Sophie signed. "But you can't do this alone. I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do." Sophie's signs were emphatic. "You've built a community. The monthly meetups, the parents who come, the kids. We're all here. We all care about this. Let us help. You're 16, Sophie." "So? I'm deaf. I understand these struggles better than any hearing adult ever could." She leaned closer to the camera. "Ava was 10 when she died, right?" Tommy nodded, his face pained. "Would you have told 10-year-old Ava she was too young to help other deaf kids?" Tommy's expression crumbled. "That's not fair. It's completely fair. You taught her that deaf people help each other. You taught her to be an advocate. Now I'm trying to do the same thing, and you're telling me I'm too young." Tommy was silent for a long moment. Then he signed. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm just scared." "Of what?" "Of failing. Of letting these kids down the way I couldn't protect Ava." "You didn't fail Ava," Sophie signed gently. "She died in an accident. That wasn't your fault. I should have been there. You can't be everywhere at once. None of us can." Sophie's signs were patient. "But if we work together, we can be in more places. We can help more kids. That's what Ava wanted, right? For deaf kids to help each other?" Tommy nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's exactly what she wanted. Then let's honor her by doing it right. Not just you, all of us." The next meetup, Tommy presented an idea to the group. A peer mentorship program. Older deaf teens matched with younger deaf kids who needed support, guidance, or just a friend who understood. The response was overwhelming. 15 teenagers volunteered immediately, including Sophie. They spent the afternoon discussing logistics, boundaries, safety protocols. The parents were involved every step of the way, creating guidelines to ensure everything was appropriate and protected. Within a month, the program was running. Sophie was matched with an 8-year-old girl named Willow, who'd just been mainstreamed into a hearing school and was struggling with isolation. They video chatted twice a week. Sophie taught Willow tricks for managing in a hearing classroom. How to position herself to see the teacher's face. How to advocate for better accommodations. How to handle kids who made fun of her signing. But mostly, they just talked. About everything. About nothing. About what it felt like to be different. One day, Willow's mother sent Sophie a message. "I just want you to know that you've changed my daughter's life. She used to come home from school crying every day. Now she comes home excited to tell me about her day. She says she's not alone anymore because she has you." Sophie showed the message to Tommy. "This is because of you," she signed. "You started all of this." "No," Tommy signed back. "Ava started it. I'm just trying to keep up with her vision." As the months turned into a year, the program grew beyond anything Tommy had imagined. The monthly meetups now drew over 50 deaf kids. The peer mentorship program had 30 active matches. They'd started fundraising to provide free ASL classes for families of deaf children. Tommy's clubhouse had become an unofficial community center for the deaf community in their area. The Hells Angels, rough, dangerous men who'd once been the subject of Rachel's nightmares, had embraced the mission. They helped with setup, security, fundraising. They wore deaf awareness patches on their vests. The local news caught wind of the story. A reporter showed up at one of the meetups, wanting to interview Tommy about the biker who'd started a deaf youth movement. Tommy refused. "This isn't about me," he told the reporter through an interpreter. This is about giving deaf kids what they deserve: community, support, and a place to be themselves. Instead, he insisted they interview Sophie. Sophie was terrified at first. She'd never been on camera, never been interviewed. But Tommy was insistent. "You're the one doing the real work," he signed. "You're the mentor, the advocate, the voice of this generation. Let people see how amazing you are." The interview aired on the local news, Sophie signing passionately about the importance of deaf peer support while an interpreter voiced her words. She talked about feeling isolated before the meetup started, about how connecting with other deaf teens had transformed her life, about the power of deaf kids helping deaf kids. The segment went viral. Within a week, Sophie had been contacted by news outlets across the state. Deaf organizations reached out, wanting to replicate the model. Schools asked her to speak to their students about deaf awareness. Tommy watched it all with a mixture of pride and bittersweet joy. This was what Ava had always wanted, for deaf kids to have a platform, a voice, a community that celebrated them rather than trying to fix them. 18 months after that day in the Target parking lot, Sophie stood at a podium addressing 300 people at a deaf education conference. 2 years ago, she signed, interpreters voicing her words to the mixed audience of deaf and hearing attendees. "I was pushed to the ground in a parking lot by a woman who was angry that I didn't hear her behind me. I was hurt, scared, and alone. Then a man stopped to help. He signed to me. He treated me like a person, not a problem. And that moment changed both of our lives." Sophie looked out at the audience, finding Tommy in the back row. He'd refused to sit on the stage, insisting this was Sophie's moment, not his. That man was a biker, a Hell's Angel, someone my mother had taught me to be afraid of. But he taught me something important, that help comes from unexpected places. That community can be built from broken pieces. That it's never too late to honor someone you love by helping others. She paused. His daughter, Ava, was deaf. She died 6 years ago. But her legacy lives on in every deaf kid who's found community through the program we built, in every parent who's learned to sign to their child, in every moment of connection and understanding. Sophie's signs became more emphatic. Ava taught her father to see the world differently. Her father taught me to believe in the power of community. And now I'm asking all of you, how will you honor the deaf people in your lives? How will you build bridges instead of barriers? How will you meet us halfway? The audience erupted in applause, clapping for the hearing attendees, hands waving for the deaf ones. After the conference, Tommy found Sophie in the hallway. "You were incredible," he signed. "I was terrified. Couldn't tell." Tommy smiled. "Ava would have loved you. You're exactly the kind of person she wanted to grow up to be. Fierce, unapologetic, unwilling to accept limits. I learned from the best," Sophie signed. "She taught me everything. I'm just passing it on." Tommy shook his head. "You've taught me just as much, Sophie. You've shown me that helping one person can ripple out to help hundreds. You've shown me that my daughter's death doesn't have to be meaningless, that I can honor her by making sure other deaf kids don't feel as alone as she sometimes did." She wasn't alone, Sophie signed firmly. She had you. And through you, she still has all of us. 3 years after that day in the parking lot, Sophie graduated high school. The ceremony was interpreted with both ASL interpreters and captioning on screens. Her name was called Sophie Mitchell, and she walked across the stage to receive her diploma. The audience clapped, but from the back section came a different sound, hands waving in the air. The entire deaf community section, including the 50-plus teenagers from the meetup program, celebrating in their own language. Tommy stood with them, his hands high, his face split with the biggest smile Sophie had ever seen on him. After the ceremony, Sophie found him in the crowd. "Congratulations, graduate," he signed. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Bullshit. You would have succeeded no matter what. I just gave you a space to thrive. You gave me so much more than that." Sophie's signs were emphatic. "You gave me community. You gave me purpose. You gave me the courage to advocate not just for myself, but for every deaf kid who feels invisible." Tommy's eyes were suspiciously bright. "What are your plans now?" "College." "Gallaudet University," Sophie signed, naming the prestigious deaf university in Washington, D.C. "Deaf education major. I want to become an advocate professionally. Help build programs like ours across the country." Ava would have gone there, Tommy signed quietly, if she'd lived long enough. She talked about it constantly, going to a university where everyone signed, where she'd be the majority for once instead of the minority. "Then I'll go for both of us," Sophie signed. "For me and for Ava." Tommy pulled her into a hug, something he rarely did. When he stepped back, he was signing quickly. "Before you go, I have something for you." He pulled a small box from his pocket. It was Ava's. "I want you to have it." Sophie opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, 2 hands forming the sign for "I love you." Ava's mother gave this to her on her 8th birthday, Tommy signed. Ava wore it every single day until he couldn't finish that sentence. "I can't take this," Sophie signed, her hands shaking. "It's too important." "That's exactly why you should have it." Tommy's signs were gentle but firm. Ava wanted her legacy to be helping other deaf people. "You're doing that every single day. You've become the person she dreamed of being. She'd want you to have something of hers." Sophie's vision blurred with tears. She put the bracelet on, the silver warm against her skin. "I'll take care of it," she signed. "I promise." "I know you will." Tommy smiled. "Just like you're taking care of all those kids who look up to you. Just like you took care of me by giving me a purpose again." "You took care of me first," Sophie reminded him. "In that parking lot. You saw me when everyone else looked away." "And you saw me," Tommy signed back. "You saw past the leather and the tattoos and the reputation. You saw someone who was hurting and gave him a reason to heal." They stood there in the warm evening air, father figure and mentee, joined by grief and purpose and a shared love for a girl neither could save but both would honor forever. "This isn't goodbye," Sophie signed. "Hell no," Tommy agreed. "I expect regular updates from Gallaudet, photos, stories, complaints about professors, the whole deal. And you better keep running the meetups, not going anywhere." Tommy's signs were firm. "This is my life's work now. Ava's legacy. Our legacy." "Our legacy," Sophie repeated. "I like the sound of that." 5 years later, Sophie stood in front of a congressional committee testifying about the need for better deaf education funding and resources. She was 23 now, confident and articulate, her signs precise as interpreters voiced her words to the lawmakers. Tommy watched from the gallery, his phone in his hand, live streaming the testimony to the group chat of mentors and mentees who'd stayed in touch over the years. The program had grown beyond anyone's wildest dreams. There were now 11 chapters across 6 states, over 300 deaf youth participating, a waiting list of families desperate for support. And at the center of it all was the girl Tommy had found on the ground in a parking lot 7 years ago, the girl who'd been hurt and invisible and alone. She wasn't invisible anymore. After the testimony, they grabbed coffee, Sophie's treat. She'd just accepted a position as the director of a national deaf advocacy organization. Her future was bright, limitless. "How does it feel?" Tommy signed. "Being important?" "I'm not important," Sophie signed back. "The work is important. You sound like Ava." Tommy's smile was bittersweet. She used to say the same thing, that she wasn't special, the work was special. "She was right," Sophie signed. "And she was special. Just like you. I'm just a biker who learned to sign. You're so much more than that." Sophie's signs were emphatic. "You're the man who stopped when everyone else walked by. You're the man who turned his grief into action. You're the man who taught me that family isn't just blood. It's choosing to show up for people who need you." Tommy wiped his eyes, not even trying to hide his emotions anymore. "I have something to tell you," he signed. "The club is voting next week on something big." "What?" "We're establishing a foundation, the Ava Bradford Memorial Foundation for Deaf Youth. We're putting serious money behind it, enough to expand the mentorship program nationwide, to provide scholarships for deaf students, to fund ASL classes for families." Sophie's hands flew to her mouth. "Tommy, that's incredible. It's what should have existed when Ava was alive," Tommy signed. "So she never had to feel alone. So she could have had what you have now, a whole community of people who understood her. She had you," Sophie signed gently. "She was never really alone. She felt alone sometimes. All deaf kids do, especially when they're the only one in their school, their family, their world." Tommy's signs were heavy with old pain. "But if this foundation does its job, no deaf kid will ever have to feel that way again. She'd be so proud of you. She'd be proud of both of us." Tommy's smile was genuine now, and she'd probably be bossing us around, telling us we're doing it wrong, insisting she knows better. Sophie laughed, the sound mixing with her animated signs. "She sounds like she was amazing." She was. Tommy's hands moved slowly, reverently. And she lives on in every kid we help, every connection we make, every moment we choose to see people instead of looking through them. That's beautiful, Sophie signed. That's the truth. Tommy looked at her. This young woman who'd stumbled into his life 7 years ago and changed everything. You know what the best part is? What? Ava kept her promise. She made me promise to help deaf kids. But through you, through this program, through everything we've built, she's still helping them. Even though she's gone, her impact keeps growing. That's what legacy means, Sophie signed. It's not about living forever. It's about making sure the good you did keeps rippling outward even after you're gone. Tommy nodded, too emotional to sign for a moment. Thank you, he finally managed, for letting me keep my promise to her, for being the person who turned my grief into purpose. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, Sophie signed back, for teaching me that one moment of kindness can change someone's entire life. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, two people connected by tragedy and triumph, by loss and love, by a little girl neither could save but both would honor forever. 7 years. 7 years since a deaf girl was pushed to the ground in a parking lot and a biker read her hands and froze. 7 years of building community, helping children, transforming grief into action. Tommy's phone buzzed with a message from his club president. Foundation vote passed unanimously. Ava would be proud, brother. He showed Sophie the message. Her face lit up with joy. This is just the beginning, she signed. Yeah, Tommy agreed. This is just the beginning. Because that's what happens when one person chooses to help instead of walking by. When one moment of kindness sparks a movement. When one broken-hearted father and one isolated teenage girl decide that their pain won't be wasted. It will be transformed into something beautiful. The Ava Bradford Memorial Foundation would go on to help thousands of deaf children across the country. The peer mentorship program would expand to 40 states. Sophie would become one of the most prominent deaf advocates of her generation. But none of that would have happened if Tommy Bradford hadn't stopped that day. If he hadn't chosen to see a girl on the ground instead of looking away like everyone else. If he hadn't read her hands and remembered his daughter and decided that his grief would no longer be just about loss, it would be about legacy. 7 years later, Sophie Mitchell stood in front of a room full of deaf teenagers at a national conference, telling them about the day she was pushed to the ground and a biker stopped to help. He couldn't save his daughter, Sophie signed to the captivated audience, but by helping me, he saved himself. And by saving himself, he saved all of you. Because that's what we do in the deaf community. We save each other. We see each other. We show up for each other even when the hearing world won't. So I'm asking each of you, who will you save? Who will you see? Who will you show up for? She held up her wrist, showing Ava's bracelet, the silver catching the light. This belonged to a girl who died before she could change the world. But through her father, through this program, through all of you, she's changing it anyway. That's the power of one person caring, one person stopping, one person choosing to turn their pain into purpose. Be that person, save someone, see someone, show up for someone. Because you never know. That one moment might be the beginning of something that changes thousands of lives. The room erupted in applause, hands waving in the air like a field of flowers in the wind. And in the back row, Tommy Bradford stood with tears streaming down his face, his hands high in the air, celebrating the legacy his daughter had created and the young woman who'd helped him build it. 7 years since he read a frightened girl's hands in a parking lot. 7 years since he'd kept his promise to Ava. 7 years since everything changed. And it all started with one simple choice, to help instead of walking by, to see instead of looking away, to turn grief into something that mattered. That was Tommy's gift to the world. That was Ava's legacy. That was Sophie's future. And it all began the day a deaf girl was pushed to the ground and a biker read her hands and froze. 10 years after that day in the Target parking lot, Sophie Mitchell sat in her office at the Ava Bradford Memorial Foundation headquarters, reviewing applications for the annual scholarship program. The foundation had grown beyond anyone's wildest expectations, now operating in 43 states, serving over 12,000 deaf youth annually, with a staff of 67 people. Her phone buzzed. A text from Tommy. Turn on Channel 7, now. Sophie grabbed her remote and switched on the TV. The news anchor was in the middle of a story. What started as a simple act of kindness has transformed into one of the nation's most successful deaf advocacy organizations. Today, we're taking a closer look at the Ava Bradford Memorial Foundation and the unlikely friendship between a Hells Angels member and a deaf teenager that sparked a movement. Sophie's stomach clenched. They'd avoided major media attention for years, preferring to let the work speak for itself. But someone had leaked the full story. The segment showed footage of Tommy at the clubhouse, helping set up for a youth meetup. Then it cut to Sophie at a congressional hearing. Then photos of Ava, smiling, signing, alive. Tommy's voice came through the interpreter. My daughter made me promise I'd use what she taught me to help other deaf people. That promise led me to Sophie. And Sophie led me to thousands of other kids who needed what Ava needed. To be seen, to be valued, to be part of a community that understood them. The segment ended with a call for donations and volunteers. Within an hour, the foundation's website had crashed from traffic. By the end of the day, they'd received over $300,000 in donations and 5,000 volunteer applications. Sophie called Tommy immediately via video relay. Did you know they were doing that story? She signed. No, Tommy signed back, looking equally shell-shocked. Someone from that conference you spoke at last month must have pitched it. Sophie, the website crashed. The phones are ringing non-stop. I know, my assistant is freaking out. Is this good or bad? Sophie thought about it for a moment. It's good. More money means we can help more kids. More volunteers means we can expand faster. But Tommy, what? This means more scrutiny. They're going to dig into your past. The club's past. Are you ready for that? Tommy's face was serious. I've been ready for that since day one. I've got nothing to hide. Yeah, I've got a record. Yeah, I was in a gang. But everything I've done for the past 10 years has been for these kids. Let them dig. They won't find anything that'll hurt the foundation. Okay, Sophie signed. Then we ride this wave and see where it takes us. Where it took them was everywhere. Within a month, Sophie had been invited to speak at the United Nations about deaf youth advocacy. The foundation received $1 million grant from a tech billionaire whose daughter was deaf. Major corporations reached out wanting to partner on deaf employment initiatives, and Tommy became an unlikely celebrity. News outlets loved the story of the reformed biker with a heart of gold. Morning shows wanted him for interviews. Parenting magazines wrote profiles. A documentary crew followed him around for 3 weeks. Tommy hated every second of it. I'm not the story, he kept insisting to Sophie. The kids are the story. Ava is the story. You're part of the story whether you like it or not, Sophie signed. People need to see that advocates come in all forms, that someone with your background can create something this beautiful. It gives hope to other people who think their past disqualifies them from doing good. I just want to help kids. You are helping kids. But now you're also helping parents, teachers, and other advocates see what's possible. The fame brought complications. Tommy's club brothers started getting harassed by reporters. Some members weren't happy about the attention. There were rumblings that Tommy should step back from the foundation, let someone with a cleaner image take the lead. Sophie shot that down immediately in a public statement. Tommy Bradford is the heart and soul of this foundation. Without him, none of this exists. Anyone who has a problem with his past is welcome to examine their own prejudices about what a hero looks like. The statement went viral. The hashtag #DotYourBikerHero trended for 3 days. But the real change happened quietly, in small moments across the country. A father in Ohio who'd been in and out of prison saw Tommy's story and signed up for ASL classes to communicate with his deaf son. If a biker can do it, he told reporters, so can I. A young man in Texas who'd been ashamed of his deaf sister started learning sign language after seeing Sophie's interviews. He later became a certified interpreter. A grandmother in Florida who'd been ignoring her deaf grandson's needs saw the documentary and broke down crying. She called the foundation the next day asking how to make amends. The ripple effects were endless, but with visibility came vulnerability. Sophie was in a meeting when her assistant burst in, face pale. You need to see this. Someone had posted on social media claiming that Tommy had inappropriate relationships with the teenage girls in the program. The post included out-of-context photos of Tommy hugging youth at events, twisted to look sinister. Sophie's blood ran cold. She called Tommy immediately. His face on the screen was devastated. They're trying to destroy everything we've built. We'll fight this, Sophie signed firmly. We'll release statements from parents, from the kids themselves. We'll show the truth. What if it doesn't matter? What if people believe it anyway? Then we make them see the truth. Sophie spent the next 72 hours on damage control. She organized a press conference where 30 parents stood together, signing and speaking about how Tommy had helped their families. Teenagers, now adults, shared their stories of mentorship and support, all emphasizing the appropriate, respectful nature of Tommy's involvement. Isabella, Sophie's first friend from the meetups, now a deaf education teacher herself, gave a particularly powerful statement. Tommy Bradford saved my life. Not dramatically, I wasn't in immediate danger, but I was drowning in isolation, and he threw me a lifeline by creating a community where I belonged. Anyone who tries to twist that into something ugly doesn't understand what it means to be deaf in a hearing world. They don't understand how rare it is to find someone who truly sees us. The accusations fell apart under scrutiny. The person who'd posted them had no connection to the foundation and admitted they'd fabricated the story for attention. But the damage was done. Tommy was shaken in a way Sophie had never seen before. What if they're right? He signed when they met in person a week later. They sat in his small house, surrounded by Ava's artwork, her photographs, her memory. Right about what? Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe a man with my background has no business working with kids. Stop. Sophie's signs were sharp. That's exactly what they want. For you to doubt yourself, to step back, to disappear. Maybe they're not wrong to want that. Yes, they are. Sophie moved to sit directly in front of him, forcing eye contact. You know what your background is? A father who loved his daughter so much that he learned an entire language for her. A man who turned his grief into action instead of destruction. A person who spent 10 years proving that anyone can change, anyone can do good, anyone can make a difference. But the accusations were lies, proven lies. Sophie's signs were emphatic. You've never, not once, done anything inappropriate. Every interaction you've had with these kids has been documented, supervised, and appropriate. The only thing you're guilty of is caring too much. Tommy's hands were shaking. I can't stop thinking about what Ava would think. If she'd be ashamed of the trouble I've caused. Ava would be proud of you. Sophie reached out and took his hands, stilling them. She'd be proud that you kept your promise, that you helped thousands of kids find community, that you didn't let your past stop you from doing good. How do you know? Because I know what you taught me. Sophie let go of his hands to sign again. You taught me that one person can make a difference. That it's never too late to choose kindness. That the deaf community takes care of its own. Ava taught you those things, and you taught them to me. And now I'm teaching them to the next generation. That's how legacy works. Tommy was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if I step back anyway? Let you run everything. The foundation would be fine without me. The foundation would survive, Sophie admitted. But it wouldn't be the same. And more importantly, all those kids who look up to you, who see someone who understands loss and grief and still chooses hope, they'd lose their role model. I'm not a role model. Yes, you are. Sophie's signs were gentle now. You're proof that it's never too late to change. That your worst day doesn't define you. That love is stronger than grief. Tommy wiped his eyes. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. Sophie smiled. Actually, I had two. Ava taught you, you taught me. Now let me teach you something. You don't get to quit. Not when kids are counting on you. Not when your daughter's legacy is still being written. Okay, Tommy signed finally. Okay, I'll stay. Good. Sophie stood up. Because we've got work to do. I just got confirmation. The Senate is holding hearings on the Deaf Education Access Act next month. They want us both to testify. Tommy's eyebrows shot up. Both of us? Both of us. The senator specifically requested that you be there. She said your story, and Ava's story, is exactly what legislators need to hear. I'm not good at that formal stuff. You're better than you think. Sophie pulled out her phone, showing him the schedule. We've got 3 weeks to prepare. I'll help you with your testimony. We'll practice until you're comfortable. Sophie, no arguments. This is happening. Ava's legacy is about to reach the national level, and you're going to be there to see it. The next 3 weeks were intense. Sophie and Tommy worked together every day, crafting his testimony, practicing his delivery, anticipating difficult questions. Tommy's statement was simple but powerful. My daughter was born deaf. For 10 years, she taught me about a world I'd never seen, a world where communication happens without sound, where community is built on understanding rather than hearing, where different isn't less, it's just different. When she died, I thought that world died with her. But then I met Sophie Mitchell, and I realized Ava's world was still out there, waiting for someone to fight for it. So that's what I've done for the past 10 years. I've fought for deaf kids to have what Ava had: community, support, and people who see them as whole human beings, not broken hearing people. The hearing room was packed. Sophie testified first, laying out the statistics, the research, the policy recommendations. She was professional, articulate, compelling. Then Tommy took the stand. He was nervous. Sophie could see it in the way his hands trembled slightly as he signed. The interpreter voiced his words, but everyone in the room was watching his hands, watching his face, watching this large tattooed biker pour his heart out about his daughter. "I'm not a policy expert," Tommy signed. "I'm not an educator or an advocate or any of the things that usually testify at these hearings. I'm just a father who lost his daughter and decided that loss had to mean something." He pulled a photograph from his pocket. Ava, at 9, signing "I love you" to the camera. Her smile brilliant. "This is Ava. She died 6 years before I met Sophie, but her impact is still growing. Through the foundation that bears her name, through the thousands of kids who've found community, through every parent who's learned to sign to their child, Ava's still changing the world." Tommy's hands moved slower now, heavier with emotion. "The Deaf Education Access Act you're considering today would have changed my daughter's life. It would have given her better resources, better support, better access to the education she deserved. I can't give that to Ava anymore, but you can give it to the thousands of kids like her who are struggling in schools that weren't built for them." He looked directly at the senators. "I'm asking you to pass this bill, not for me, not even for Ava, for every deaf kid who's sitting in a classroom right now feeling alone, feeling invisible, feeling like they don't belong. Give them what my daughter should have had. Give them a fighting chance." The room was silent when he finished. Then slowly, applause began. Not just polite congressional applause, but genuine, moved, emotional applause. The interpreter for the deaf audience members was crying as she voiced the senator's comments. Several senators signed "thank you" directly to Tommy. Clumsy, unpracticed signs, but the effort was there. 3 months later, the Deaf Education Access Act passed with bipartisan support. Sophie and Tommy were invited to the signing ceremony at the White House. They stood together as the president signed the bill into law, making sweeping changes to how deaf education was funded and implemented across the country. The president handed the pen to Tommy afterward. "This is for your daughter," the president said through an interpreter. "For Ava, and for every child like her." Tommy accepted the pen with shaking hands. Later, he would frame it alongside Ava's photograph, a testament to how far her legacy had reached. That night, Sophie and Tommy sat on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, exhausted and overwhelmed. "We did it," Sophie signed. "Ava's law is real." Tommy smiled at the nickname. The media had started calling it Ava's Law almost immediately, and the name had stuck. She'd be so excited, he signed. She'd probably be signing a mile a minute, asking a million questions, wanting to know every detail. "Tell me about her," Sophie signed. "What was she like when she got excited?" Tommy's face lit up. She'd bounce, literally bounce up and down while signing so fast her hands blurred. And she'd get this look on her face, this pure joy, like nothing else in the world mattered except whatever she was excited about. "She sounds amazing." She was. Tommy looked out over the reflection pool. "You know what's strange? I spent so long being angry after she died. Angry at the drunk driver who hit her. Angry at God. Angry at myself for not being there. That's normal. Maybe. But somewhere along the way, the anger turned into something else." He turned to look at Sophie. "It turned into purpose. And I think that's what Ava would have wanted. Not for me to stay angry, but to do something useful with the grief. That's exactly what you did." "We did," Tommy corrected. "None of this happens without you, Sophie. You turned my small community meetups into a national movement. You gave voice to everything Ava believed in." "I learned from the best," Sophie signed. "Both of you." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd been brought together by tragedy and had created something beautiful from the wreckage. "Can I ask you something?" Tommy signed eventually. "Anything. Are you happy with how your life turned out?" Sophie considered the question seriously. At 26, she was the director of a national foundation, a recognized advocate, someone who'd testified before Congress and spoken at the UN. She had everything she'd ever dreamed of professionally. But more than that, she had community. She had purpose. She had a chosen family of deaf people and allies who understood her. She had made a difference in thousands of lives. Yes, she signed finally. I'm happy. Not because everything's perfect, but because I found my purpose. Because that day in the parking lot, when I thought I was at my lowest, turned out to be the beginning of everything good in my life. Me too, Tommy signed. I thought my life ended when Ava died. But helping you, building this foundation, watching you grow into the advocate you are today, it gave me a reason to keep living. We saved each other, Sophie signed. Yeah, Tommy agreed. We did. 5 more years passed. The foundation continued to grow. Sophie published a book about deaf advocacy that became required reading in teacher education programs. Tommy was awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal for his work with deaf youth. They continued the monthly meetups, though they'd expanded to weekly gatherings in multiple cities. The peer mentorship program now had wait lists. They'd started a scholarship fund that sent 20 deaf students to college every year. Isabella had become Sophie's second-in-command at the foundation. Dakota ran the West Coast chapters. Jordan headed up the mentorship training program. The kids from those first meetups were now adults, carrying forward everything they'd learned. And then came the phone call that changed everything again. Sophie was in a meeting when her assistant interrupted. I'm sorry, but Tommy's in the hospital. It's serious. Sophie's world stopped. She grabbed her keys and drove straight to the hospital, her mind racing with terrible possibilities. Tommy was 57 now. Was it his heart? An accident? Please, not an accident. She couldn't lose him the way he'd lost Ava. She found him in a private room, hooked up to monitors but awake. His face was pale, but he managed a weak smile when he saw her. What happened? Sophie signed, trying to keep her hands from shaking. Heart attack. Tommy signed back, his movements slower than usual. Small one. They caught it early. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're in the hospital. Okay. I'm temporarily not fine. But I will be. Sophie sank into the chair beside his bed. You scared me. Scared myself, Tommy admitted. 1 minute I'm working on the budget for next quarter. The next minute I'm on the floor of my office with paramedics standing over me. The budget can wait. You need to rest. I've been resting. For 6 hours. I'm bored. Too bad. Sophie's signs were firm. The doctor said you need to slow down. Take time off. Actually relax for once in your life. I don't know how to relax. Then you'll learn. Sophie pulled out her phone. I'm already drafting a message to the staff. You're taking a 3-month leave of absence. 3 months? Sophie, I can't. Yes, you can. Isabella and I can run things. The foundation isn't going to fall apart without you for 3 months. Tommy looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't have the energy. Fine. 3 months. But I'm still answering emails. No, you're not. Sophie, no emails, no meetings, no foundation business. Sophie's signs were uncompromising. You've spent 15 years taking care of everyone else. Now it's time to take care of yourself. Tommy was silent for a long moment. Then, I don't know who I am without this work. Sophie felt her heart break a little. You're Tommy Bradford, Ava's father, my mentor, my friend. The foundation is what you do, not who you are. It feels like who I am. I know. Sophie reached out and took his hand. But you need to remember, Ava didn't love you because of the work you did. She loved you because you're you. Kind, patient, strong. Those qualities existed before the foundation, and they'll exist after. There is no after. I'm doing this until I die. Not if you die from working yourself to death. Sophie's expression was serious. Tommy, you had a heart attack. A warning. Your body is telling you to slow down. Please listen to it. Tommy closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet with tears. I'm scared, he signed. If I stop working, if I slow down, then I have to think about everything I've been running from. Ava's death, the guilt, the grief that never goes away. The grief isn't going away whether you're working or not. Sophie signed gently. But maybe it's time to stop running from it, to sit with it, to let yourself feel it instead of burying it under 18-hour workdays. I don't know if I can do that. You can, and I'll be there with you every step of the way. Sophie squeezed his hand. You've been there for me for 15 years. Let me be there for you now. Tommy nodded slowly. Okay, 3 months. But you better visit, every week. Whether you like it or not, I'll like it. Tommy managed to smile. You're my favorite person, Sophie Mitchell. You know that, right? You're mine too, Tommy Bradford. The 3 months of medical leave were harder than Tommy had anticipated. Without the constant busyness of foundation work, he was alone with his grief in a way he hadn't been in years. True to her word, Sophie visited every week. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence. Sometimes they went through old photos of Ava, and Tommy would tell stories Sophie had heard a dozen times but never got tired of hearing. Tell me about the first time she signed Daddy, Sophie would request. And Tommy would light up, his hands moving through the familiar story. She was 18 months old. We'd been working on it for weeks. Then one morning I walked into her room to get her up, and she sat up in her crib and signed it perfectly. Daddy. I cried so hard she started crying too, but then she signed it again and again like she knew it was important. That's beautiful. That was Ava. Always knowing when something mattered. Slowly, over those 3 months, something shifted in Tommy. The constant tension he'd carried for years began to ease. He started sleeping better, started eating better, started actually living instead of just working. He joined a grief support group for parents who'd lost children. He started therapy, something he'd always resisted, thinking he could handle everything himself. And he started writing, not for publication, just for himself. Writing about Ava, about his journey through grief, about what building the foundation had meant to him. When the 3 months ended, Tommy returned to work, but he was different, calmer, more present, more willing to delegate and trust others. You look good, Sophie signed when she saw him at the office. I feel good, Tommy signed back. Genuinely good. Not just, I'm too busy to think about my pain. Good. I'm proud of you. Couldn't have done it without you pushing me. That's what family does, Sophie signed. We push each other to be better. Family, Tommy repeated, testing the word. Yeah. That's what we are, isn't it? Always have been. Another 5 years passed. 20 years since that day in the Target parking lot. Sophie was 31 now, married to a deaf architect named Ethan. She'd just published her second book. Tommy was 62, healthy and happy in a way he'd never imagined possible after Ava's death. He'd cut back to part-time at the foundation, spending his free time volunteering at deaf schools and mentoring young activists. The foundation now operated in all 50 states. They'd helped over 50,000 deaf youth. The peer mentorship program had been replicated internationally. Ava's law had been strengthened with additional funding and protections, and through it all, Tommy and Sophie remained close. Weekly dinners, constant texts, shared celebration of every milestone. On the 20th anniversary of their first meeting, the foundation organized a celebration. 700 people attended. Former mentees, parents, advocates, teachers, interpreters. People whose lives had been touched by the ripple effect of one biker stopping to help one deaf girl. Sophie gave the keynote speech, Tommy sitting in the front row. 20 years ago, she signed to the crowd. I was pushed to the ground in a parking lot. I was hurt, scared, and alone. I didn't know that moment would change my entire life. A man stopped to help. A biker. Someone I'd been taught to fear. He signed to me. He saw me. He treated me like a person worth protecting. Sophie looked directly at Tommy. That man was grieving his daughter. He was broken. He was lost. But he chose to help anyway. And that choice, that single choice to stop and help, created ripples that are still spreading today. Every kid we've helped, every family we've supported, every policy we've changed, every life we've touched, it all traces back to that moment, to one person choosing kindness when he could have walked away. Sophie paused, emotion thick in her throat. But here's what I didn't understand until I was older. I helped him too. He thought he was saving me, but I was helping save him. He gave me community, but I gave him purpose. He taught me to be an advocate, but I taught him that his grief didn't have to be the end of his story. That's what this foundation is really about. Not just deaf kids helping deaf kids, but people helping people. Broken people helping other broken people. Everyone carrying their grief and pain and using it to light the way for others. Sophie's hands moved slower now, more deliberate. Ava Bradford died 26 years ago. She was 10 years old. She'll never grow up, never graduate, never have the life she deserved. But her impact, her legacy, keeps growing. Through her father. Through me. Through every person in this room and thousands more around the world. So tonight we celebrate 20 years of work. But more than that, We celebrate what happens when one person refuses to let their pain be meaningless. When one person chooses to turn tragedy into purpose. When one person stops to help, even when it would be easier to walk away. The room erupted in applause, clapping and waving hands, deaf and hearing united in celebration. After the speeches and awards and formal program, Sophie found Tommy on the patio, staring up at the stars. Hiding. She signed. Reflecting. Tommy corrected. There's a difference. Sophie joined him, following his gaze to the night sky. What are you reflecting on? Everything. Nothing. Tommy's hands moved slowly. 20 years. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago at the same time. I know what you mean. I keep thinking about that day. What if I'd kept riding? What if I hadn't stopped? But you did stop. Yeah. Tommy smiled. Best decision I ever made. Second best. Sophie corrected. Second. The first best was promising Ava you'd help deaf kids. Stopping for me was just you keeping that promise. Tommy was quiet for a moment. Then, you know what I think Ava would say if she could see all this? What? She'd say, I told you so. Tommy's signs were accompanied by a laugh. She always knew I had more to give than I thought I did. She always pushed me to be better, do more, care deeper. Sounds like someone else I know. Wonder where you learned it. Tommy nudged her shoulder. So, what's next for you? You've conquered the advocacy world. What's left? I'm pregnant. Sophie signed, her face breaking into a smile. Tommy's eyes went wide. What? When? How long have you known? 2 weeks. I wanted to tell you in person. Sophie's hands trembled slightly with joy. Ethan and I are having a baby. Sophie, that's incredible. Tommy pulled her into a hug, then pulled back to sign. Boy or girl? Too early to know. But Tommy, what? If it's a girl, we want to name her Ava. Tommy froze. His hands dropped to his sides, unable to move. Tears streamed down his face. You don't have to, Sophie signed quickly. I just thought. Tommy shook his head, finally finding his hands again. I'd be honored. Ava would be honored. Good. Sophie wiped her own tears. Because I can't think of a better legacy than naming my daughter after the girl who started all of this. She's going to be amazing, Tommy signed. With you as her mother, she's going to change the world. She'll have a great honorary grandfather to help. Grandfather. Tommy tested the sign, a smile spreading across his face. I like that. Good. Because you're stuck with us now. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else. They stood on the patio, looking up at the stars, thinking about the past and the future and the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. 20 years since a deaf girl was pushed to the ground. 20 years since a biker read her hands and froze. 20 years of building, growing, healing, and helping. And now, a new generation was coming. A little girl who would grow up knowing about her namesake, about the foundation built in her honor, about the power of choosing kindness even in the midst of grief. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning again. The ripples spreading wider with each passing year, touching lives they would never meet, creating change they would never see, proving that one moment of compassion could transform the world. That's what Ava had known all along. That's what Tommy had learned through helping Sophie. That's what Sophie would teach little Ava someday. And the legacy would continue, generation after generation, built on a foundation of love and loss and the unwavering belief that every person deserves to be seen, valued, and heard, whether they communicate with sound or with silence.